If you're enjoying haunted UK fiction, please consider supporting the show on Patreon or Ko-fi. Simply search for Haunted UK Podcast. Hello and welcome, dear listeners, to Haunted UK Fiction, a sister podcast to The Haunted UK, which features original flash fiction, short stories and novellas with paranormal themes. All stories you will hear were written by a collection of talented writers, authors and storytellers, both independent and professional. To celebrate Friday the 13th, we've assembled a trilogy of stories featuring one of the world's most fearsome and wondrous creatures, the domestic cat. Our first story was written by one of the villagers from Willerby, a strange and mysterious little town whose eeriness even affects the feline population. Get comfortable. Grab a little something to sip on. Perhaps cuddle up under a blanket to help offset the chills coming your way. And let's dive into All Cats Are Black, a Willerby story. Tabitha arrived in Willerby as a nervous RSPCA kitten, only just old enough to leave her mother. Simone called her Tabitha for her tabby coat. She thought naming her that was cute and funny. For the first few weeks of her life in the village, she never left the house, but just as Simone was beginning to wonder whether she ever would, for some Willerby cats never do, Tabitha tiptoed into the front garden for the first time. As she grew bolder, she ventured further afield, past Jake's pool and the smokers outside the pub, over the green and past Sharp's corner, and then, at last, into the woods, where she hunted rats, mice, and other delicious things. Then deeper into the trees where, at last, she found the wide clearing where the witches once met. There she joined with other village cats, all jet black, from every nose to every toe. On the night of each full moon in the clearing, in the dark wood, the cats sang their wordless song of meaning and power, summoning those who could hear, filling the forest around them with strange life. Ogres and goblins, brownies and dwarves, ghasts, imps and hags, and other strange people from which humans have no name. When all those invited have arrived, the cats fall silent, and the conference begins, sometimes in one big group, but more commonly in subcommittees and working parties of common interest. Border disputes and cross-dimensional crime, the alignment of the stars in the sky, and what this meant for all the hidden kingdoms, the guarding of the portals and the progress of the Great War, noteworthy discoveries made by alchemists and explorers at the edge of their worlds. The cats watch and listen to it all, taking silent notes, and then when it's all over, they noiselessly disperse to pass the messages and agreed actions, going about their secret business in the dead of each night until the next full moon. "Tabs is getting so lazy," said Simone to her boyfriend Matt one Sunday morning. "She's always asleep apart from when she's hungry, and then after she's eaten, she just goes straight back to bed." Matt looked down at her snoring on the sheepskin under the radiator. He looked away and then, frowning, looked back. Did she always have black paws? Simone stretched and yawned. No, and it's not just her paws. The tip of her tail is too now. Matt sat up. Cats don't change colour though, do they? They do here, said Simone. It takes a while, but they all end up that way in the end. In Willerby, all the cats are black. Next, a story sent in by Susan Ballinger, a history buff with a bent towards the unexplained, and a head full of trivia. Her subject reflects her diverse interests. Semi-retired in St. Petersburg, Florida, Susan spends her free time focusing on nature photography and checking the darkest corners for the weird and wonderful. The story which you're about to hear was originally published in the UK by Dyslexia. Here is The Medium's Cat by Susan Ballinger. The women arrive in the afternoon, rousing me from my nap in Madame's easy chair. I stretch, digging my claws deep into the cushion and reaching my tail high in the air. As they gather, I move among them, snaking around their ankles. I rub my scent on their shoes, my calling card for them to take home. They've come to speak to their dead. Mrs. Dovecote wants to know what to do with her inheritance. Mrs. Covey will ask if Mother suffered badly. Miss Cooper wants to know if her sister remembers where she put the key to the safe deposit box. These women believe Madame can reach their loved ones beyond the veil. Madame herself has no such belief, but doesn't try to dissuade the women who come to her. She laughs at my baleful stares and says, "No harm done." They leave smiling. Madame tells the stories the women come to hear. She tells them their husbands are happy in the spirit land. She tells them their lost babies are in the arms of angels. She tells them their mothers are standing beside them, surrounded by light. Today's women are shepherded into the room Madame calls her salon. They bustle like a flock of nervous pigeons, fluttering and cooing. I'm careful to avoid being stepped on when I duck, unnoticed beneath their feet. Madame invites them to take seats around a small round table draped with heavy cloth. Underneath the fabric, the table is so flimsy that a playful leap onto it will knock it over. There is a shelf between the legs of the table that is ideal for napping. When she's expecting visitors, Madame hides things on the napping spot. Sometimes there's a bell. Once there was a small radio, but that was difficult for Madame to operate with her toes. There's always a dented biscuit tin. When Madame steps on it, it makes a loud cracking sound. Madame tells her visitors it's spirit rapping. I crouch under a solid antique chair near the cold, unused fireplace. The women are instructed to hush and hold hands. Madame tells them to think of those they miss and to picture their lost loved ones in their minds. In the quiet, I hear them breathing, their heartbeats. I hear mice scratching in the walls and insects chewing the floorboards, and soft creaks from the attic overhead. Unlike other mediums, Madame does not pray for protection from the spirits she will call out from behind the veil. The group sings no hymns to invoke guardian angels. Madame does not hold with tradition. When she notices my disapproving stare, she snorts and tells me that her visitors can pray and sing hymns at church on Sunday. She calls out to the spirits, as if she believes there are such things. She closes her eyes and raises her hands toward the ceiling. "Oh, spirits," she calls. My whiskers twitch nervously. "Spirits, come to us," she calls. Wind whistles through the chimney. I flatten my ears tight against my head. Madame throws her head back on her shoulders and is still. She doesn't see the mist rising behind her, twisting like smoke in a breeze. She doesn't smell the air thickening or see the shadows that congeal and reach out from the corners of the room. She pretends to rouse herself with a loud sigh. "Ah, a spirit is with us," she declares. I prowl the room, warning the wretched phantasms Madame unwittingly calls from the darkness to keep their distance. I peer under chairs, disturbing the putrid mist forming beneath them, and into the dark corners, keeping the heaviest, darkest shadows at bay. I watch as a dark stain spreads across the floor towards Madame and the women. It stops and lies still at the sound of my low growl. "Who are you, spirit?" Madame calls out. "A woman. I sense a girl. She has a message." My hackles rise to a sharp ridge along my spine as cold spreads across the floor. The stain shivers. She is young, Madame tells her visitors. Gazes dart around the table. I see the letter S. Sarah. No. Sally. "Sally!" Miss Cooper exclaims. "It is my sister? Sally, is that you?" Madame smiles. "Yes, Sally. That's it. Sally is here." There is motion behind the heavy curtains. I creep towards the window, keeping close to the walls, whiskers twitching. The air sours as I get closer. The curtains twitch. I duck inside with the creature that was once a woman. I hiss and bare my fangs. The thing retreats and begins to lose form. I catch sight of lumps of dirty hair full of cobwebs, grey-green flesh and milky eyes staring from a ruined face as it vanishes. When I first arrived, the spirits were no more than shadows in mist. As a kitten, I'd pounce and tumble on tendrils of fog. Madame was angry at first, but soon discovered that her visitors willingly accepted my mewling as the sounds of spirits from beyond the veil. Madame announces more spirits arriving from the void. She waves a gauze ribbon in the air. In the candlelight it appears to float like a mist. The women around the table nod and sigh and weep. They believe they can see faces shining in the dark. Mrs. Covey yelps at an errant touch of my tail as I circle her chair and stare down the spectre with half a face and a single empty eye, weeping black ooze that stands beside her. A sound comes from under the table. Crack. I know it's the biscuit tin, but the women jump at the sound. "Who knocks?" Madame calls. She does not see the hollow-eyed and slack-jawed crouched figure that has materialized under her chair, its flesh hanging in colorless shreds. My fur rises and stands on end, doubling my size. I screech at the figure under Madame's chair. The women gasp and shout in terror. "Spirit," calls Madame. "What troubles you? Do you bring a message?" The biscuit tin produces 2 knocks. "We are waiting," she calls. The creature under her chair reaches out, but my yowling warns it back into shadow. Madame produces a series of staccato bursts in a random pattern from the biscuit tin. Yes, I understand," she tells nobody. The women around the table lean forward, eager to hear this message from the spirit land. Madame is in playful mood. The tin answers in the rhythm of a tune. Crack, 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 crack. She laughs and tells the women that this spirit is a mischief maker, who often appears for her and means no harm. They relax and titter nervously until the table lurches, tipping to one side, then landing back on all 4 legs. I growl in frustration. Madame is enjoying the role of mischief maker. I swat at her ankle, and she withdraws her foot from under the little shelf with a sigh of disappointment. "Is my mother here?" Mrs. Covey asks in a timid voice. Madame tells her that she will ask the mischievous spirit to find her. She closes her eyes, and the tin issues 2 slow cracks. Her head lolls forward, and a groan comes from deep in her throat. After a moment, she rasps quietly. "Betty. Are you there? Betty?" A squeak comes from Mrs. Covey. "Mother, oh mother, how I miss you." Warmth is pouring into the room. I look around for the creature I know will be hiding somewhere. All I see is a pinkish glow, like sunset, behind Madam. I fix my stare on it just in case. Mrs. Covey is crying. Madam tells her in a rasping voice, "I am here, in the spirit land. Father is here. He sends his love. He says to get the car serviced right away. You know how he is." Madam sits up suddenly and looks around the room as if she has just woken from a nap. She looks at each of the women, acting for a few moments as if she has never seen them before. "Ladies, ah yes, how radiant you all look. I can see that the spirits have touched you." The women thank Madam and follow her out of the room. Madam accepts their thanks and their money with a bashful smile. "It is nothing," she insists. "It is my calling, my very purpose in the world." As they prepare to leave, Madam offers each woman a candle, for a modest donation, and tells them to light it each night. They can see the light through the veil, she tells them, and furtively watches the basket on a plant stand by the door, filled with money. "What are you grumbling at?" she asks me later, stuffing cash into the silver teapot on the mantel. I turn my back to her and show my disapproval with a stern twitch of my tail. She laughs, as she always does. "You're one to talk. You put on quite a show, howling and yowling. You'd think I'd raise the dead. You deserve a little treat." I twitch my tail again. Of course I deserve a treat. I follow her into the kitchen, purring. Last, a story by Melissa West, which features a sweet old cat whose appearances may be deceiving. Melissa grew up in both French and English Canada before moving to the Midwest United States several years ago. Her passion for writing stories and composing music began in childhood, as did her love of all things spooky and supernatural. Bringing all these elements together to co-create the Haunted UK Fiction podcast has been an incredible adventure, and connecting with other writers and creatives has been an inspiration. She loves all creatures great and small, but holds on to the sneaking suspicion that all cats are murderous fiends below their lush, velvety exterior. Here is Have You Seen Murphy? By Melissa West. Have you seen Murphy? The nurse's shoes squeak on the pristine expanse of vinyl flooring as she makes her way down the hospital hallway. From her perch at the nurse's station, Jenna cranes her neck to look both ways down the corridor. "He was here a minute ago," she replies vaguely, turning her gaze to the empty cat bed behind her desk. The sudden screech of alarms and chaotic beeping of machines coming from one of the rooms down the hall launches both of them into action. They rush to the bedside of an old woman, her glassy, sightless eyes fixed on the ceiling of her hospital room. The nurse checks the woman for a pulse, then meets Jenna's gaze and shakes her head softly. Jenna circles to the far side of the bed and turns off a set of machines, rendering the room quiet once again. She looks across at her colleague, the woman's corpse between them, and notes the puzzled look on the nurse's face. "What is it?" inquires Jenna, staring intently at the nurse. "I was just in here 2 hours ago. She was fine. I mean, I know everyone on this floor is terminal, but she wasn't on death's door by any stretch. What happened?" The nurse's question isn't directed at anyone, but rather thrown into the stagnant air of the hospital room. "Sometimes the body just lets go," whispers Jenna, laying her hand on the dead woman's rapidly cooling fingers. She takes a deep breath and squares her shoulders. "Right, we should call in the powers that be to sign off on this," she adds, shifting back into action mode. "Murphy, there you are!" exclaims the nurse, grabbing the small feline off the foot of the bed. "With all the excitement, I didn't even see you there." She holds the cat up at eye level and takes on a serious tone. "How do you know when they're about to go? All those years of nursing school and I couldn't even tell." "How do you know, Murphy?" she questions. The cat stares back at her with a disinterested look, blinks ever so slowly, then wriggles out of her grasp, lands with a soft thud onto the floor, and saunters back into the hallway. "It is uncanny how he seems to be able to predict when one of them is going to go," echoes Jenna. "Just last month he wandered into Mrs. Gregory's room, and within the hour she was gone." I've heard stories about animals, typically cats, having the uncanny ability to predict when someone is going to die. The whole thing is just creepy if you ask me. The nurse rubs the goosebumps off her arms and greets the incoming group of people come to record the death as she walks out of the room to continue her rounds. Jenna heads back to her post at the nurse's station and makes note of Murphy, curled up in his little cat bed behind her chair, and the night wears on. Eventually, day breaks. Shifts change, with a blur of nurses, doctors, janitorial staff, caregivers, visitors, deliveries, a whirling carousel of people, sounds and smells. Murphy sleeps through most of it, only waking occasionally when someone gives him a gentle pat on the head. "Such a sweet cat," they coo. "How old is he?" some ask. No one knows the answer, and Murphy prefers to keep it that way. Weeks go by. The carousel comes round again. Another night shift. Jenna is at the nurse's station again. This time, Murphy chooses to be rather deliberate as he stalks the halls on velvet paws, choosing which room to visit next. Jenna watches from her desk as he enters the 5th room on the right, Mr. Corrigan's room. She gingerly gets up from her chair and tiptoes towards the door, then peeks around the corner, squinting into the dimly lit room. She watches as Murphy leaps with the swift agility of his species, easily clearing the hospital bed railing and landing soundlessly onto the mattress next to the sleeping man. Murphy stealthily climbs onto the man's chest, his small, lithe body rising and falling with the man's steady breaths. The cat takes a couple of steps forward, towards the man's head, then stops. Watching the man sleep with a stare so intense, it sends a chill down Jenna's spine. The cat then begins to stretch forward, keeping its paws firmly in place, its neck stretching in an almost unnatural way as his head moves towards the old man's face. Closer. Closer. The cat's mouth stretches open, a dark, gaping hole, with tiny pearlescent razor-sharp teeth. Jenna is frozen in place, unsure of what is about to transpire, but feeling in her gut that something is very, very wrong. The cat begins to inhale. It's a subtle movement, a long, slow intake of breath. It takes a moment for Jenna to realize that while this is happening, Mr. Corrigan is exhaling to the same rhythm, almost as if the cat is sucking the breath, the literal life, out of the man. The three of them remain suspended in time, the cat, the old man, and the nurse, in a seemingly unstoppable, slow, silent, yet somehow strangely still violent progression towards the man's end. The man's rattling, final gasping breath snaps Jenna out of her trance. She lets out a small cry, which causes the cat to turn toward her. Their eyes lock for a moment. Then the room is suddenly drowned in the screech of the alarm and the cacophonous beeps. Murphy jumps off the bed and runs back down the hall. Jenna watches as his velvety body moves across the floor, and she notices he seems much more spry than earlier that day, almost like he's more youthful. She claws through her memories, trying to recall whether he was like this the other times one of the patients died, with Murphy at their bedside. Back at the nurse's station, Murphy curls up in his bed. He's feeling much better now. Best not let it go so long next time. He'd been at this for decades. He should know better than to let this much time go by between feedings. He found it strange no one ever seemed to notice he didn't eat actual food, drink water, use the litter box. He chalked it up to the constant change in staff, shifts. Everyone presumed someone else had fed him or cleaned up after him. This was also why no one knew exactly how old he was. There had been a lot of turnover the past 80 years. Murphy looks up at Jenna as she regains her post at the nurse's station. They can still hear the alarm beeping from Mr. Corrigan's room. Jenna sits in her chair, staring straight ahead as other nurses and staff race down the hall. Murphy's eyes bore into her back. She knows his secret now, but she'll never tell. She'll probably have quit by morning, and someone new will take her place, and his secret will be safe a while longer. The cat curls into a ball, tucks its nose under its tail, and closes its eyes, dreaming of whose life he will take next in exchange for a few more weeks. The effect never lasts. The people in this ward are old. There isn't much life left in them to take. A thought crosses Murphy's mind. A terribly terrible but clever thought. What if? "Hey, Jenna, time to go home, clearly." The voice startles Jenna awake. She hadn't even realized she'd nodded off at her desk. "Thanks, Kyle," she mumbles, sheepishly grabbing her bag from under the desk. "I had the weirdest dream," she begins, glancing back at the empty cat bed behind her. "Never mind," she says, shaking her head and smiling at her colleague. She lets herself out the security door and heads down the stairwell to the parking garage. Murphy watches her, playfully, from the top of the stairs before reaching one velvet paw in front of the other, his eyes firmly set on his prey. That brings us to the end of this episode. We truly hope you enjoyed these frightening feline stories. If you would like to hear more from the eerie town of Willerby, you can find 50 more stories on their website, welcometowillerby.com. Susan Ballinger is currently working on a book about the history of investigating spirit mediums, like the Madam, which has the working title, Life Among the Spirits. Melissa is currently working on a full-length story for the Haunted UK Fiction podcast. She is also planning a relaunch of the Skylark Bell for late 2026. Social media and contact information for all three of these writers can be found in the show's notes. If you have an original story that would send a chill down our spines and you would like to submit it for review, simply send it in to hauntedukfiction@hotmail.com. That's hauntedukfiction@hotmail.com. Until next time, stay safe and take care.